At dawn, the Appalachian wilderness seems to breathe with an ancient pulse, its mist drifting through the trees like a memory struggling to take form. Towering ridges fade into silver haze, and quiet hollows hold shadows that linger too long, as if watching those who dare to enter. For generations, hikers and locals have whispered about strange symbols carved into stone outcrops, engravings too precise, too deliberate, to be attributed to erosion or the idle creativity of wanderers. These markings feel older than the forest itself, etched by hands unknown and belonging to no culture recorded in human history. Scientists have attempted to decode the glyphs, approaching them with tools sharpened by modern research, carbon analysis, pattern comparison, geological dating. Yet every method collapses beneath the same unsettling truth: these carvings refuse to fit any established timeline. Some stones appear untouched by weathering, as if protected by something unseen, while others show signs of age far exceeding the earliest known inhabitants of the region. Experts offer theories, but none survive scrutiny for long. The symbols mirror no tribal art, no migration influence, no linguistic root. It is as though they come from a culture erased before its existence was ever acknowledged. Local legends, however, paint a far darker picture than science dares to entertain. Elders speak of a people who lived in the mountains long before recorded tribes, a group said to possess knowledge that did not belong to mortals. Some stories claim the carvings are not messages but warnings, markers placed to keep travelers from crossing into places where the natural world thins. Others insist the symbols were meant to bind something ancient beneath the earth, a presence older than humanity's first breath. These tales may sound impossible, yet they linger because every discovery only deepens the divide between fact and fear. Today, as researchers revisit the Appalachian backcountry with newer technology and fewer assumptions, the mystery of the glyphs grows rather than fades. Each expedition uncovers more symbols in places once thought unreachable, as if the mountains themselves are slowly revealing a story that was never meant for human eyes. The tension between scientific reasoning and ancient lore tightens with every unanswered question, drawing investigators deeper into a landscape that resists explanation. And while theories multiply, one quiet truth remains: what you're about to see has been intentionally hidden, and for reasons few dare to acknowledge. In this forgotten place today, long before roads carved their way through the valleys, before colonial maps traced the first uncertain outlines of the eastern woodlands, the Appalachian Mountains stood as colossal witnesses to ages beyond human comprehension. Geologists estimate these ridges once rivaled the Alps in height, towering peaks born more than 480 million years ago. Time has worn them down, but not erased their memory. Their slopes carry whispers older than civilizations, older even than the first humans to set foot on this continent. And it is within this ancient backbone of North America that the earliest mysteries of Appalachia begin to surface. Pre-Columbian cultures lived throughout the region for thousands of years, leaving behind traces of villages, burial mounds, tools, artwork, and stories carried by oral tradition. Yet unlike other parts of the continent, where archaeological records form discernible timelines, Appalachia's past reads more like a patchwork, full of holes, inconsistencies, and cultures that seem to rise and vanish abruptly. Some groups, such as the Adena and the later Hopewell peoples, left behind earthworks that hint at astonishing astronomical knowledge. Others appear in the archaeological record for only a brief moment before disappearing without explanation. No signs of war. No environmental catastrophe. Just absence, sharp and sudden. Even Native American oral traditions acknowledge these missing pieces. Among the Cherokee, Iroquois, Shawnee, and other tribes with deep roots in the region, stories persist of first people who lived in the mountains long before their ancestors arrived. These beings were described not as spirits, but as physical, intelligent, and eerily advanced in their understanding of the land. Some tales speak of sky people descending at night, illuminating the valleys with moving lights. Others mention star markers, symbols etched into stone to map constellations or honor visitors who came from above. Scholars often dismiss these accounts as mythology, yet the carvings discovered on remote ridges frequently resemble celestial diagrams more than decorative patterns. The deeper researchers dig, the more contradictions arise. Tools found in certain Appalachian caves don't match known cultures. Clay fragments uncovered beside riverbeds predate the tribes historically associated with the area. Even stranger are monolithic stone formations whose alignment mirrors stellar bodies with uncanny accuracy, created at a time when, according to traditional timelines, such knowledge should not have existed here. Each discovery bends the boundaries of what archaeology confidently claims to know. Academia continues to describe these anomalies as coincidences, misinterpretations, or artifacts of unrelated groups mistakenly linked together. Yet local lore insists the gaps in the record are deliberate, created by civilizations that either fled or were erased. The stone symbols scattered across the mountains, some older than any recognized tribe, are said to mark places where these forgotten peoples interacted with forces from the sky. In Appalachia, history and legend do not run parallel, they collide. The official timelines strain against stories rooted in generations of memory, and the mountains themselves seem determined to guard the truth. What happened here before time was recorded? Who carved the first marks into these ageless stones? And why does so much evidence contradict the version of history we've been taught? As we move forward, the answers become harder to ignore, and far more unsettling. The discovery of the mountain glyphs began not with scholars or archaeologists, but with chance, an accident buried deep in the Appalachian wilds. In the late 1800s, a group of miners surveying a remote ridge for potential coal seams noticed something strange carved into an exposed wall of stone. At first, they assumed it was graffiti or the remnants of an old boundary marker. But when they brushed away the lichen and dirt, they uncovered spirals so precise they seemed almost machined, their grooves impossibly smooth despite centuries of weathering. Startled, the miners reported the markings to local authorities, who dismissed the find as a curiosity rather than a discovery. The site was ignored for decades, its secret sealed once more by creeping moss and mountain silence. It wasn't until the 1960s, when a pair of hikers took a wrong turn during a storm, that the glyphs resurfaced. Seeking shelter beneath an overhang, they found themselves surrounded by carvings illuminated by flashes of lightning, humanoid silhouettes with elongated limbs, star-like clusters, interlocking triangles, and geometric patterns arranged with unnerving symmetry. The hikers later described the experience as standing inside a story we weren't meant to read. Their compasses spun wildly that night, refusing to point north, and their radios produced only static until they returned to the main trail. Word of the glyphs spread quickly, attracting amateur researchers, curiosity seekers, and eventually professional teams. Early theories attempted to frame the carvings within familiar boundaries. Some insisted they were Native American symbols misinterpreted through modern eyes. However, tribal historians rejected this immediately. None recognized the style, meaning, or purpose of the designs. Others proposed the glyphs were a hoax, elaborate etchings created by pranksters or miners seeking to amuse themselves. Yet core samples taken from the carved surfaces revealed weathering patterns far too ancient to align with such explanations. Even geologists were puzzled by the razor-like precision of lines etched into stone so brittle that replicating them without modern tools seemed nearly impossible. As research intensified, so did the controversy. Within months, federal agencies designated the surrounding ridge as an environmentally sensitive and geologically unstable zone, restricting public access and halting independent study. Officials claimed the slopes were prone to collapse, citing concerns for public safety. But locals who had lived near the mountains their entire lives argued the area was no more unstable than any other Appalachian terrain. To them, the sudden restrictions felt less like precaution and more like concealment. Whispers began to circulate, that survey teams had discovered glyphs beyond the first wall, deeper in the ridge, and that some carvings depicted shapes no one could easily categorize, constellations misaligned with the current night sky, elongated figures reaching toward unknown points, and patterns resembling star maps of places yet undiscovered. The more authorities insisted the area was unsafe, the more determined the community became to uncover what lay hidden beneath the official narrative. And so the mystery of the mountain glyphs entered a new, more dangerous chapter, one defined not only by discovery, but by the growing suspicion that someone wanted the truth buried. When the glyphs finally drew the attention of the academic world, researchers arrived with confidence. Archaeologists, linguists, geologists, and even cryptographers stepped onto the mountain believing the mystery could be unraveled with the right tools and enough patience. But from the very beginning, the site resisted every attempt to make sense of it. Each new test produced more contradictions than answers, as though the mountain itself guarded a secret that modern science was not meant to decode. Archaeologists were the first to confront the wall of impossibility. Excavations around the primary carving site revealed scattered fragments of charcoal and ancient fire pits, seemingly perfect samples for carbon dating. Yet the results were baffling. Some samples suggested human activity as recent as 1,000 years ago. Others dated back more than 10,000 years, predating known habitation of the region. A few readings produced ages far older than both estimates, so ancient that no human culture should have existed in North America at the time. The inconsistencies were dismissed as contamination, but repeated tests yielded the same chaotic spread of dates. It was as if the very ground beneath the carvings carried multiple timelines woven together unnaturally. Linguists attempted to analyze the symbols with comparative databases, searching for parallels in indigenous languages, Old World scripts, and even proto-writing systems from early human settlements. Their efforts failed spectacularly. The glyphs formed no recognizable phonetic structure, no repeated sequences, and no rhythm that suggested spoken language. Some patterns resembled mathematical notation, others astronomical charts, and still others stood alone in shapes that defied categorization. One linguist famously remarked, "It's not that the symbols cannot be translated, it's that they do not want to be." Geologists faced their own challenges. Rock samples surrounding the carvings exhibited strange magnetic signatures, anomalies strong enough to disrupt handheld compasses and sensitive equipment. These distortions were localized, appearing only within a few feet of certain glyph clusters, as if the carvings themselves influenced the magnetic field. Efforts to explain the phenomenon through iron deposits or lightning strikes failed. The rock composition showed no abnormalities capable of generating such effects. Even more unsettling were the tool marks. High-powered microscopes revealed incisions too smooth, too consistent, to have been created with stone or bone tools. Some grooves showed microscopic striations resembling those made by modern rotary blades, yet the age of the carvings, based on weathering alone, far exceeded the existence of any advanced tools. To complicate matters further, the weathering patterns themselves defied logic. Certain carvings appeared almost new, their edges crisp and unmarred by erosion, despite being positioned on exposed surfaces that should have endured centuries of wind and rain. Other glyphs only inches away seemed ancient, worn nearly flat as if they had existed for tens of thousands of years. Traditional geological models could not reconcile these contradictions. Theories were proposed, tested, and discarded. Some suggested the carvings had been made across different eras, but this explanation collapsed under the flawless continuity of the larger design. Whoever, or whatever, etched these symbols did so with precision and purpose, seemingly outside the boundaries of time as we understand it. In academic circles, the frustration grew palpable. Rational explanations began to sound more like excuses, stretched thin against the weight of mounting anomalies. Funding slowed. Peer-reviewed papers stalled in limbo, torn apart by critics demanding evidence that simply did not fit into existing frameworks. Researchers who publicly acknowledged the unexplainable aspects of the site found their reputations quietly threatened. And yet, the forbidden aura surrounding the glyphs only intensified. The more science tried to illuminate the mystery, the deeper the shadow stretched, revealing not answers but the unsettling possibility that the truth behind the glyphs might lie beyond the reach of human knowledge. Long before academics argued over data points and geological inconsistencies, the people who lived among these mountains carried stories far older than any carved timeline. In the Cherokee, Shawnee, and Monacan oral traditions, the Appalachians were never merely land, they were alive, aware, and guarded by beings whose presence predated human memory. These legends describe the ridges as dwelling places of the Old Ones, entities neither gods nor mortals, but something that walked in the deep places of the earth when the world was still forming. Their symbols, it was said, were carved for the sky rather than the soil. Cherokee stories speak of Nunahai, mysterious guardians who lived within the mountains and appeared only when boundaries were crossed. While often protective, they were also known to leave warnings in the form of strange marks on stone, signs that humans were nearing places not meant for them. Some elders claim the glyphs scattered through the higher ridges resemble these ancestral warnings, meant not as messages to humans but as reminders of an older pact between the land and the beings who shaped it. Among the Shawnee, there are tales of the Watchers in the High Fog, beings said to communicate with the stars. Their legends describe symbols etched into rock faces that speak upward, aligning with constellations in ways that mirror the mountain glyphs discovered today. These markings, they say, were not carved for earthly eyes. They were signals, either invitations or protections, sent skyward long before recognized tribes existed. The Monacan people share equally chilling narratives. Their folklore tells of nights when the carvings glowed faintly beneath a full moon, pulsing like embers of living stone. Travelers who ignored these warnings were said to vanish without a trace, their disappearances attributed to the Old Ones reclaiming what wandered too close. Even today, some residents of the Blue Ridge swear that on certain nights the symbols emit a faint shimmer, a low hum that vibrates through the ground as if responding to something unseen overhead. These legends, dismissed by many as metaphor or superstition, gain unsettling weight when aligned with modern reports. Hikers describe hearing whispers near the glyph walls, soft voices carried by still air. Others recount sensations of being watched, followed, or measured. A few claim the symbols shift subtly in shape when viewed from different angles, as if revealing different meanings to different people. Skeptics call these exaggerations. Locals call them warnings. But the most disturbing belief shared across tribal traditions is this: the markings were not created for humans. They were created about humans. Messages etched by ancient beings who observed early people with keen interest, and perhaps concern. Messages that catalogued, cautioned, or foretold something about our presence in a land where we were never meant to tread freely. If these legends hold even a fragment of truth, then the question becomes deeply psychological and profoundly unsettling: what were these warnings meant to protect us from, and who, or what, left them behind in the first place? When researchers began cataloging the mountain glyphs, the first impression was chaos: spirals, intersecting lines, humanoid shapes, and elaborate geometric clusters scattered across stone like fragments of a forgotten language. But as specialists from multiple fields layered the data together, patterns emerged with a clarity that felt almost intentional. Certain symbols repeated at precise intervals. Specific geometric shapes appeared only in clusters of 3 or 7. And beneath the surface randomness, a mathematical rhythm pulsed like a heartbeat. Archaeologists noticed the spirals were not random swirls but logarithmic curves, designs rarely found in pre-Columbian North America. Comparative analysis revealed eerie similarities to Old World iconography, Sumerian sun spirals, Olmec star glyphs, and even motifs carved at Göbekli Tepe thousands of years ago. Cultures separated by oceans and epochs should not share such patterns, yet the mountain carvings aligned with them in form and, even more disturbingly, in meaning. They appeared to track cycles, of seasons, of stars, of something larger moving silently across the sky. The geometric clusters drew the attention of mathematicians. Many featured ratios astonishingly close to the golden spiral, and several displayed alignments corresponding to cardinal directions with near-perfect precision. More troubling were the carved triangles whose angles seemed to reference astronomical constellations. But not the constellations as we see them today, the constellations as they appeared thousands of years ago, before Earth's axial precession subtly shifted the sky. For this to be intentional, whoever carved the symbols would have needed a level of astronomical awareness typically associated with ancient civilizations such as Babylon or early Mesoamerica, not isolated mountain inhabitants in the prehistoric Appalachians. Some experts, speaking off record, admitted that the glyphs resembled compressed star charts. One linguist, who requested anonymity after her institution discouraged further comment, claimed that the symbols mapped stellar drift over millennia, using geometric transformations far beyond what early American cultures are believed to have known. Another researcher noted that several patterns seemed to depict the cyclical wobble of Earth's rotation, a phenomenon modern science formally recognized only in comparatively recent centuries. But the most startling revelation came when astronomers ran simulations using the glyphs alignments as coordinates. When projected backward through time, the patterns converged on moments of significant celestial change, solar anomalies, meteor showers, rare planetary alignments. It was as if the stones were marking not mythology, but events, warning signs written in the sky and recorded in stone long before recorded history acknowledged such knowledge. One cluster of symbols, previously dismissed as decorative, mirrored the orbital pattern of a star visible only during a narrow prehistoric window. Another appeared to track the shifting position of a constellation that would have been prominent roughly 12,000 years ago, long before any known civilization possessed the means to study the heavens with this degree of accuracy. Taken together, the implications were unnerving. The glyphs did not simply imitate ancient iconography, they predated many of its known uses. They suggested cross-continental knowledge sharing long before accepted timelines allow. And more than that, they hinted at a code left by a culture capable of predicting celestial cycles that modern science has only recently begun to understand. As the evidence mounted, one conclusion lingered like a shadow over every researcher's desk: whoever carved these symbols did not just observe the sky. They understood it. The deeper one ventures into the story of the mountain glyphs, the more the line between scientific mystery and human tragedy begins to blur. Nowhere is this more evident than in the shadowed account of the 1978 expedition, a research mission whispered about in academic circles but officially denied in every public record. According to locals, the team was funded not by a university, but by a private institution known for sponsoring unconventional archaeological work. Their goal was simple: reach the upper cliffs where new glyphs had reportedly been sighted and document them before authorities shut down access to the ridge entirely. But what the team encountered in those remote heights has been pieced together only through fragments, discarded notes, partial witness accounts, and the desperate insistence of families who say the truth was buried along with the expedition. Recovered notebooks, found weeks later by hunters miles from the reported base camp, offer the first unsettling clues. Several pages describe a low, persistent humming that seemed to vibrate through the rock itself. The sound intensified at night, often accompanied by flashes of pale blue light flickering along the cliff face. One researcher sketched what he called moving stars, drifting above the ridge in deliberate arcs, too slow for meteors yet too erratic for aircraft. Another drew detailed replicas of glyphs no one had ever seen before, symbols far more complex than those at the main site, arranged in spirals that expanded outward like ripples on water. The team's final entries paint a picture of rising fear. Notes mention equipment malfunctioning without cause, compasses spinning as if rejecting the mountain's magnetic field, and an incident in which two members claimed to see figures standing near the carving wall, figures that vanished when the group approached. On the last readable page, one researcher scrawled a single line: "There is something here with us." Official statements later claimed the expedition was voluntarily abandoned due to hazardous conditions. According to the report, the team left the area safely and chose not to continue due to unstable terrain. But families of the researchers tell a different story. None of their loved ones returned home. No bodies were recovered, no rescue teams deployed, no follow-up investigation conducted. Instead, they say, communication with officials abruptly ceased. Requests for information were met with sealed files or outright silence. One family member recalls being told that no such expedition was ever formally registered. Rumors quickly filled the void. Some believe the team discovered glyphs that contradicted academic timelines so drastically that their findings were suppressed. Others think they encountered something more active, something that responded to their presence. A retired forest worker, speaking anonymously, claimed he saw helicopters circling the ridge the week after the team disappeared, followed by government vehicles blocking the trail for months. What truly happened in those mountains in 1978 remains one of Appalachia's most unsettling questions. The notebooks exist. The missing researchers exist. The unanswered silence from official channels exists. Together, they form a haunting reminder that the mountain glyphs are not just symbols carved into stone, they are the gateway into a mystery that has already claimed lives. Behind closed doors, in conference hall corners and late-night email chains, researchers who've studied the mountain glyphs whisper about theories they would never dare publish. They are ideas that break careers, unravel academic reputations, and tread into territories labeled pseudoscience before the first sentence is spoken. Yet these same forbidden hypotheses explain far more of the evidence than any official report ever has. The first theory suggests the existence of a lost Appalachian civilization, one erased by a cataclysm so complete that only stone carvings survived its disappearance. Proponents argue that the glyphs' astronomical precision, advanced geometry, and impossible age ranges hint at a culture with knowledge rivaling the great ancient societies of the world. If true, this would mean North America once hosted a civilization older than the pyramids, older than Mesopotamia, and sophisticated enough to map the heavens with startling accuracy. The second hypothesis pushes further into the uncanny. Some researchers, examining weathering inconsistencies and technological anomalies in the tool marks, quietly propose a pre-human culture. Not animals. Not proto-humans. Something else, an intelligence capable of studying the stars long before Homo sapiens dominated the continent. They point to oral traditions describing first beings who taught early tribes how to read the sky, and they ask, what if those stories are historical memory, not myth? The third theory is the one almost no academic will touch publicly, that the glyphs may not be human in origin at all. Not a lost tribe. Not an ancient people. But watchers. Visitors. A non-human intelligence using Appalachia's oldest mountains as a natural observatory. This interpretation explains the magnetic anomalies, the humming reported by researchers, and the star charts carved with knowledge millennia beyond accepted historical timelines. It ties together folklore of glowing symbols, vanishing travelers, and warnings etched into stone for reasons we still cannot comprehend. Each hypothesis is dismissed as impossible, yet each aligns more closely with the evidence than the sanitized explanations found in textbooks. And as more researchers privately acknowledge the holes in the official narrative, one truth becomes unavoidable: the mountain glyphs challenge not only our understanding of history, but the very boundaries of what we believe humanity has ever known. In the years following the 1978 disappearance, the glyphs shifted from a regional curiosity to a topic wrapped in tightening secrecy. Trails that once led freely to the cliffs were quietly rerouted. Entire sections of the ridge were declared off-limits, surrounded by fencing that appeared overnight. Signs warned of unstable terrain, yet locals noticed something far more deliberate: motion sensors buried along footpaths, new surveillance poles disguised as utility markers, and drones humming over the mountains at dusk. None of these precautions matched the remote simplicity of Appalachia. They matched containment. Researchers seeking permits to study the glyphs found their applications stalled indefinitely or rejected without clear justification. Even seasoned academics who had previously worked at the site received abrupt denials. Several excavation pits, once open to the public, were filled in and sealed under layers of concrete. Geological teams were told their services were no longer required. Archaeological departments received vague notices instructing them to redirect resources. The message, though unspoken, was unmistakable: the mountains were closing their doors. Attempts to obtain documentation only deepened the mystery. Freedom of Information Act requests returned stacks of heavily redacted pages, entire paragraphs blacked out, dates missing, names erased. In several cases, officials responded by claiming no record of such research exists, even when requesters provided specific file numbers referenced in older archives. One journalist reported that after filing repeated FOIA requests, 2 unmarked vehicles appeared outside her home for a week before she abandoned the story entirely. Meanwhile, locals observed strange developments that defied official explanations. Small no-fly zones were established over the ridge despite the absence of commercial air routes. Forest Service workers were reassigned without warning. Hikers who wandered too close to restricted areas reported being confronted by individuals who were not park rangers, men who carried no identifiable badges and offered no names, only warnings to turn back. The escalation was subtle but unmistakable. Someone was building a veil around the mountain glyphs, tightening it year by year until the mystery became smothered beneath layers of bureaucracy and silence. Public curiosity was replaced with controlled narratives. Researchers fell quiet. Families of the missing received no answers. And the glyphs themselves, once accessible to anyone willing to hike far enough, now stood hidden behind fences, cameras, and an unspoken threat. Whether the intent is to protect the public or protect a secret remains unclear. But one truth echoes across the mountains, whispered by residents who have watched their homeland change under invisible pressure: someone wants these symbols forgotten. After decades of investigations, disappearances, suppressed reports, and legends older than recorded history, one truth rises from the Appalachian mist: the glyphs refuse to be contained by any single explanation. They sit at the crossroads of science and myth, their meaning suspended between what we know and what we fear. To reach a final verdict, we must weave together every strand, evidence etched in stone, stories passed down through generations, and the unsettling anomalies uncovered by those who dared to look too closely. Science offers fragments, geometric patterns aligned with celestial events, magnetic disturbances with no geological source, tool marks that defy known ancient technologies. Researchers acknowledge, though rarely in public, that the glyphs behave less like a cultural artifact and more like a system, deliberate, encoded, and part of a structure larger than any isolated carving. The inconsistencies in dating methods suggest not tampering, but intention. The symbols may have been created across vast spans of time or preserved through means we do not yet understand. Rational frameworks strain beneath these contradictions, yet the evidence stands unbroken. Myth, on the other hand, paints a narrative that feels impossibly cohesive. The old ones, sky messengers, star-watching guardians, all echo the same motif: entities who understood the mountains, the heavens, and humanity's precarious place between them. Tales of glowing symbols, humming stone, vanished travelers, and watchers in the fog are no longer mere folklore when aligned with modern reports. Instead, they read like memories, distorted by time, yet rooted in events our ancestors struggled to comprehend. But what if the glyphs were never meant to explain the past at all? What if they were carved to warn the future? Many of the astronomical patterns embedded in the symbols correspond not to past celestial events, but to cycles near completion, alignments, shifts, and anomalies due to occur within our own era. Some researchers privately suggest the glyphs track a recurring cosmic phenomenon, one significant enough for an ancient intelligence, human or otherwise, to memorialize its timeline in stone. The spirals resemble orbital paths. The geometric clusters mirror upcoming stellar realignments. Even the humming reported by the 1978 expedition corresponds to electromagnetic surges expected during rare solar events. This interpretation suggests a chilling possibility: the mountain carvings are not history. They are prophecy. Perhaps the lost civilization fled, or was erased, during the last occurrence of this cosmic cycle. Perhaps the old ones carved warnings for those who would come later, knowing that memory fades but stone endures. Or perhaps the beings who made the symbols were not warning us, but warning about us, mapping the moment when human civilization would stand again on the edge of something enormous, something returning, something watching. The modern cover-up begins to make more sense under this light. If the glyphs predict a future catastrophe, celestial, geological, or something far stranger, revealing the truth could spark panic or expose humanity to a knowledge we are not prepared to face. Restricting access becomes not an act of control, but containment. Not secrecy, but survival. And yet, the mountains still whisper. The symbols remain. Despite weather, despite suppression, despite the silent pressure of agencies determined to bury the truth, the carvings endure as if guarded by the land itself. They wait, not forgotten, not dormant, but patient. Perhaps their meaning has not vanished. Perhaps it has simply not yet arrived. As the sky shifts toward the alignments mirrored in the stones, and as anomalies long predicted begin to take shape, one final thought lingers like a shadow across the ridges: the mountain has already told its story. We're the ones who haven't understood it yet.